Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be going over my top 5 tips I think every single teemo player needs to know. Now, my goal behind this video is to make you a better teemo player, as well as to give you a better understanding of the game as a whole. I am a absolute huge Teemo fan. He was the one that got me into League of Legends. He was my first main. He made it so I could just torment my enemies, and that was just such a fun play style for me when I first started. I'm going to put timestamps also to make this video as navigatable as possible and to waste as little of your time as possible. They are going to be on the bottom right hand corner, as well as the scrolling bar is going to be segmented into different sections to just make it as readable as possible. If you want to contact me directly with any questions, you can make sure to comment down below. I will try my best to help you out, as well as a link in the description is going to have a Discord link for you if you want to join that and send me a direct message there. Now, I'm a bit limited with this format, only doing 5 tips, so I'm going to pin the most useful and the most detailed Teemo tips that I do not cover in the video down in the comments. So please, if you are an experienced Teemo player, make sure to comment down below. And with all that out of the way, let's get into tip number 1. All right, and getting into tip number 1, I'm going to be going really quickly through this section because I have a lot of information to get through and I do not want it to last too long and to get too chatty. No. So first thing I want to talk about, Teemo's win rate by game length. The most important thing to pull from here is his 30 to 35 minute range and his 35 to 40 minute range being the 4th best and the 6th best in those 2 different categories. You need to understand you do not want to be FFing games. As bleak as they may look with Teemo, he has an absurd amount of objective control and an ability to come back in the later games by poking people out and removing a decent amount of their HP pool before they even get into team fights. Next thing, he only has a 1% ban rate, which is really crazy. It's been steadily declining since patch 10.16, whereas about 4 times higher than what it is now. So it is a great time for Teemo. It is Teemo time. Next up, let's go over something that I think is going to be very important in understanding when you should be taking Ignite, when you should be taking TP. When you do not have kill pressure on the enemy target, you should be taking Teleport because this will enable you to get farther ahead in the game by getting as much CS as possible. If you are able to really get a lot of solo kills when playing Teemo, Ignite is going to be a decent choice when you are playing Teemo. Next up, items. The core is definitely going to be Nashers and the Andres. They are just great items. Now, with the runes, it is really dependent on the matchup. If you need consistent harass against someone with very little threat on you, area is going to be very effective. If you're against a champion that likes to take all ins and have a lot of slows, Phase Rush is going to be very good. If you have time to scale and get into the late game, for example, the enemy team does not really have many early game champions, a Dark Harvest is going to be the great section. Now, let's get into the skills. How you want to max out these skills are going to be very, very different. So E is going to be your go-to E, and then Q into W. You can change these up a little bit. You can go a Q max into an E max if you're against a mage and you just are looking to get a little bit of poke off and you aren't able to take those long consistent trades where you're able to get off several of the E procs. Now, with all that covered, if you guys have any questions about any of these stats that I covered on Mr. Teemo, let me know in the comments down below, and that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into tip number 2, we're going to talk about what Teemo's strength is and how you can look to abuse him to gain LP. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the runes that provide movement speed is just so important for Teemo, and your ability to maintain space against a lot of these melee matchups you're going to be seeing in the top lane is going to be so crucial. So things like Phase Rush, things like Nimbus Cloak, things like Celerity, things like very important early boot purchases are going to be great, and also proper usage of your move click. Teemo gains 26% movement speed when he hasn't been damaged by a champion or turret in the last 5 seconds. So having this is going to be very important, and the active is super strong, and this is what you want to use when an enemy champion is looking to engage on you and you're not sure if you can win the 1v1. An example would be maybe a Garen is queuing at you with his increased run speed. You want to make sure that you get your move quick as soon as possible so you can match cooldown with cooldown. Even though his might be a little bit shorter, you can mix up your Q binding dart cooldown on certain all-in engages, and you can be using your move click for other ones. So please understand this. The strength of Teemo is really his ability to control the movement speed differential, as well as creating auto spacing where you're able to do damage on the enemy when they are unable to do it on you. This is just going to be a very important concept to have a good understanding of if you want to climb and be a very strong Teemo player. And that will wrap up tip number 2. All right, and getting into tip number 3, we're going to talk about mushroom placement. This is exceedingly important for Teemo because he consistently pushes out the lane and looks for harass on the enemy targets and looks for gold from plates. So how you effectively stop a lot of these ganks is by mushroom placement. Now, junglers generally like to take the most direct route to you as possible. So if you are over here, you're pushed in a lane, junglers are going to look to go down this route. This is a very, very unproductive shroom. I would always want to have these shrooms right up against the walls where they are not going to be procced by the creeps, and it is most likely going to be in the path where the enemy target jungler is going to be harassing you from. Now, next up, I want to talk about the mushroom placement around objective controls. Teemo has some of the strongest objective control in the game, being able to poke people out before they even see anything. They're just triggering traps and taking a crap ton of damage. So making sure that you have mushrooms that are in common areas, particularly where the support and some of the carries are going to walk to look to contest these targets, is going to be important. However, you have to have the foresight to go and mushroom some of these extremely important objectives. Now, maybe you can get away with not mushrooming the first and second dragon, but you need to be, no matter what, you should have shrooms up for the third and fourth dragon, and obviously you need to have them around the Baron Pit. This is going to be a very, very good way to snowball an objective lead and making sure that your team is going to be in an advantageous situation with their health pools than the enemy that is poked out a little bit by their mushrooms, but they're still trying to contest objectives. This is where a lot of his late game strength is. This is why a lot of that win rate is very, very high on Teemo when you are playing it. Now, there isn't too many Teemos playing right now. In the current patch, Teemo has a pretty low pick rate at only 1.69%, so people aren't too they aren't too used to Teemo's strategies. They aren't exactly sure where all the mushrooms are going to be. So you just want to take full advantage of their inexperience against playing against Teemo's and their shroom placement in the current season. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into tip number 4, we are going to be talking a little bit more about mushrooms because they are that important. If you did not know, you are able to bounce mushrooms off of one another to harass enemies that are doing objectives. This is so insanely important because of the strength that the buffs give and the souls give, that you are able to do this at here or the Baron Pit, and you are able to harass people from a relatively safe range. Now you're able to, first of all, you have a possibility of stealing the objective, which might happen a little bit of the time, and you are also able to harass enemy targets that might take a little bit too much damage and stop doing the objective. So if you are able to, make sure you look to place a bunch of mushrooms off and harass people when they are doing the extremely important objectives. Now, if you did not know, this is the trigger range of the traps, this circle right here that you can see in the cursor. However, if you have it placed, the explosion range is a lot larger than the reticule. You can see it goes out to about here and makes a nice wide circle. So you do not have to worry at all about this reticule if you are a very new Teemo player. The range of your mushrooms damage is quite huge. So harassing people is a little bit easier than you might think when they have a bunch of enemy targets that are DPSing down the dragon over in this area. Also taking angles to where they are looking to fade to if they are contested too much. Say you have your ally team right here, taking an angle with your mushroom bounces can be a very effective way of playing this out as well, and maybe stopping some escapes or just getting mushrooms right on top of the ADC's max auto attack range on the objective. And that will wrap up tip number 4. All right, and getting into the final tip, we are going to be covering team fighting and how you should look to play this out. Now, due to Teemo's extremely strong, consistent damage, he is quite an effective front-to-back team fighter. This means he does not have to look for flanks. However, flanks can be effective when playing Teemo, particularly when you're ahead. Front-to-back team fights are a-okay with Teemo, as long as he's able to maximize his uptime with his autos, as well as being able to just toss shrooms safely into the lines of the enemies, making them think, oh god, do we need to retreat from that shroom? We need to get away from that shroom. Can we sleep that shroom? Can we put a control ward down for that shroom? What are we doing for the shroom in the team fights? And it just absolutely can be a great way, first of all, to peel for your allies, giving you a huge slow coming out of your ultimate, and then doing the blinding dart on the targets that are very strong, consistent damage dealers with their auto attack. Something like a Master Yi or a Jinx, getting blinds down on those kind of targets is going to be quite effective. So again, when you are team fighting with Teemo, you are effective in front to back team fighting. However, when playing Teemo, you can look for flanks. They can be ineffective if they have a lot of turn potential. If there's something like a Malphite ult, a Sejuani ult, something with a stun that can lock you down in a decent amount of damage and the whole team can turn on you, Teemo has very few tools to get out of very sticky situations that he can't just run away from with his move quick. So be very careful flanking. Unless you are smart, you let the enemy engage your allies, getting their front line involved, getting some of their abilities used, using your teams as meat sacks and being the carry, and then coming in on the back line, maybe their ADC, and getting a bunch of damage and shrooms out on the playfield when you are on Teemo. So keep these in mind when you are team fighting. Obviously, if you are looking to flank, you want to use control wards and the sweeper to augment the strength and your ability to do that. And that will wrap up my final tip, guys. If you have any questions for me, you can hit me up in the comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And with all that out of the way, guys, you take it easy and have a great night.